And welcome back, Cosmic Family, into this beautiful self-healing journey. I'm excited to be finally sharing my own story of my recent shadowscape or shadow work that I've done recently, especially with the transits going on. I've had a few interviews now, so it's been a little bit harder for me to kind of share with you all some teachings, but here is my most recent share regarding shadow work, and it's been a journey for me in the last 2 months to process a lot of things that were really deep down suppressed within my own consciousness, and so I was able to really open up a lot of these experiences, and now I'm ready to share that with you all, so that if you're exploring or looking to go into shadow work, whatever your version is, hopefully we can share this together. And so here is kind of the outline. The shadowscape, shadow work, requires us to kind of really understand what we're going into. And so the first thing is really the quest of why I went into this shadow work. And then you kind of have to set up. I mean, you have to prepare yourself for going into this work. And mine was a 6-day journey. And so that was a really important time for me to actually set up to go into 6 days. And then you have the journey into the shadow self. So understanding what it is that we're looking at, what we're going into, who is this shadow self that we talk about. And then when you actually process these shadow experiences, this is kind of like the part of the shadow dance. And then finally, for me personally, I had a lot of spirit guides and voices from my many parallel lives that were involved in my own healing of this shadow dance. And then finally, you really do go into this Phoenix Rising experience where you're able to kind of release a lot of the shadow elements that was holding you back, whether they're trauma or experiences that was holding you back. And then finally, getting into a gratitude space is really important to understand this experience from a gratitude space, to understand then the healing and the upgrades that you actually provide yourself and experience after you've really faced your demons, your shadows, your dark traits. And then finally, I'm going to go into the transits over here. Going into the transits where astrologically there was a lot of energies that were supporting me to going into this work. So I wanted to kind of go into that. And finally, I'd love for you all to share your own journey, whatever your journey of darkness is. Okay, so let's start with the quest. The quest is really processing fear and going into the fear so that you can understand what this fear is that's holding you back. So for me, I was self-reflecting, and at this point, I'm starting to become a healer, a doctor in acupuncture. But until then, I was really struggling with the idea of what a healer was. I think I've experienced a lot of not so great healers and not so great doctors. I mean, the Western medical practices, I kind of struggle with. I haven't seen a doctor in 10 years, and so for me, it's understanding what would it take for me to be a healer for others, because this whole process has been my own self-healing journey. So how do I kind of take this on for other people? And then some other things I experienced, really these self-sabotaging patterns. For me, it was with women and my mother figure, as well as some social anxiety that I experienced coming into this country. Excuse me, cat hair. If you guys have cat, you understand. Sometimes hairballs gets into your mouth. And so for me, I'll go into the deeper concept of, I think a lot of men today who have the feminine aspects, who are more sensitive, possibly can struggle with a lot of women wanting help or being in need of support. And sometimes we tend to kind of give up our own personal boundaries for them. And then for me, it was my mother figure. I had a tiger mom, but I also struggle with a lot of things connecting to the mother energy. And so I sometimes went to relationship looking for that. And then I've had a lot of social anxiety that I think a lot of you may have experienced, or maybe not. I've been pretty good with hiding that, but I think that was the problem, is that I was hiding the social anxiety, and it was keeping me from really experiencing authentic connection with other people. And so that was really important for me to kind of process this, because a lot of times, even with conscious people, I would kind of get a whole 30 seconds of a monologue of telling me not to go talk to somebody. And so I really wanted to process this because it was taking me way too long to like talk to somebody that looked really cool, really interesting to talk to, but I would kind of have to go through these old things in my head, and that was keeping me from just being myself. And what shadow work is not, it is not just sitting down and channeling information. It is not just journaling. I think that's a very one-sided experience when you're journaling. You're just downloading information to a journal and you're speaking to yourself, but not really in a deeper conversation. And then it is not just meditation, okay? I think meditation, again, is this aspect where you're either tuning in to the all or understanding your separate experience from everybody else. And then finally, a lot of people sometimes do plant medicine. I've done plant medicine with my own shadow work, but this time I chose not to. I've been kind of also processing my own connection with cannabis, and so I chose not to do any plant medicine, and I have not. I've actually been really good with not doing any cannabis and really trying to find peace with just being myself without any aids, right? Whether it's magic mushroom, whether it's cannabis, whether it's prescription drugs or whatever. I think in general, I just wanted to find that place where I could be just sober and really in myself. And so the setup is really important because if I'm going to go in the 6-day darkness retreat, no one can reach me because at this point, when you're wearing a blindfold and going into, for me, what I call the darkness retreat, which is I chose to blindfold myself and not interact with the world as whole, it requires you to not have any commitments. And so for 6 days, I made sure no one was looking for me, no one was needing me. I basically said I was going offline with a lot of my close friends, and I had to just trust. Even if I turned off my phone, I just had to trust that whatever messages people sent me, they were not expecting a return message in like 6 days. Okay, that was very important. And so I obviously talked to my family to make sure they were not expecting an answer within 6 days because I was really going deep into my own practice. The setting environment was really important because it's not always easy to have, like for me, I did it at home. And that was nice because I didn't need to understand where I was at. I didn't need to know the environment, the setting where I was sleeping, where I was eating. So I personally, I have my bedroom. I have actually a separate healing room, and then just a living room where I was eating. And I was interacting with my dad, and I told my dad, "Hey, Dad, I need help to eat. Well, at least to make food. I didn't need to eat. He didn't need to feed me, so that was a good thing." And then the other part is this blindfold. I had to make sure that the blindfold allowed me to open my eyes because one thing that happens is when you close your eyes, it's easy to fall into a sleep. Versus when my eyes are open but they cannot see, it triggers a different part of my brain that allows me to actually process my environment. But knowing that I don't have any visual input, that the visual cortex will just turn off and then my brain activity will reroute itself. So that was kind of very interesting. And this is another thing too, is there's no way you can be distracted. I can't be on my phone. I cannot be on a computer. I cannot read anything. I cannot go outside. I mean, I could go outside, but I wouldn't know what I was looking at. So really, there was nothing to do but this practice for 6 days. And so the next piece is understanding what is the shadow self that we talk about and what's the point, right? And so the point is really, there's a lot of intentions and directions up here where you're actually, your shadow self is the character traits that you know are not good for yourself, and they are the ones that also keep you from actually experiencing the world more authentically. And so for you, for me, I had to learn to self-trigger. I had to go into the uncomfortable parts of my life that I did not want to go into, that would actually cause me to go and be emotionally charged and have to actually go into that moment, experiencing, I've been bullied when I was young. I had some issues with my mom, and so I had to go into those moments that I may have turned off my emotions. And so you're really re-traumatizing yourself, but in a third-person view, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of the beginning of going to shadow self. The second piece that's really important is this ability to chunk up and down of your higher self, present self, and lower self. And so you're really shifting the altitude of perception, is what I call it. And so when you are in the lower self, you get to be in the experience of feeling the pain, feeling the anxiety, feeling what makes you upset. The present self is separate from the past self, right? Because I am re-triggering a lot of my past trauma. And so in the present self, you recognize that you're in a much better state, but you may not understand why the experience happened. And so the higher self allows me to kind of go up. So I call it like first person view in a video game and a third person view in a video game. And maybe the lower self is, it's all emotions. You're just feeling the emotions in your heart. And that's important to understand because you have these different aspects of yourself that allows you to understand the bigger picture, but then to go deeper into the moment that the pain happened. Because sometimes if the moment that the pain happened, you didn't allow it to come out, then that pain is now repressed. That experience is a repressed emotion that will now cause what I call extra suppression in your energetic field. You're basically, instead of releasing it, you're suppressing it, if that makes sense. And then the third piece of shadow self is really working with the guides and dreams. The subconscious is a place where the shadow self resides. A lot of triggers that we do are actually subconscious. The things that I've experienced even in relationship, I didn't know I was experiencing that. My reflection of what these women were reflecting back at me is how I got to know consciously what was happening to me. But really, it was a subconscious trigger, whether I was afraid of women in a certain way, whether I was afraid of my mother, or I was looking for my mother. Those were subconscious, and I didn't know they were happening until the reflection. And so it's really important to kind of trust the guides that are watching you, talking to you, and then in the dream space. And it allows you to get different vantage point and even different lifetimes that give you an understanding of why you had to experience something. And so the next piece is really the big piece. This is the shadow dance. And so this is now the moment where I put on my blindfold. I went 6 days, and the first 2 days it's been pretty easy because there's a lot of mental chatter, right? When people say you go meditation, during that meditation, if you do meditate for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, you're actually just processing the information that is in what's called your mindscape, your mind field. And so a lot of time this is where the mantra space is. When you do mantras, you're like, I am abundant, I am abundant, I am abundant. That is now being sent to your mental field. And so when you are going into this shadow world, you are really, and for me, I was blindfolded, so I could not see outside of the world. And what's really important is the blindfold, well, really, people say our eyes is the window to our soul. And so I experienced that recently where I realized that I was constantly channeling information from people. When I was looking at them, I would actually naturally channel that information. And so by blindfolding myself, I was the only person in my field. And so no one else, besides talking to my dad, I wasn't around anybody else besides my cats, right? And so I had to channel information for myself, and no one was there to distract me. And so it was really important that the blindfold made sure that I was not picking up any light. So it was a really powerful, beautiful experience. The first 2 days was really, really easy because I was just dumping all the mental information. However, day 3 started to happen, and this is the moment of truth. This is the moment where you no longer have anything in your mind space. You no longer have the monkey chatter, what people call it. This is the idea of what meditation is supposed to be, where you're able to actually find your authentic self, and then everything else in your mind is kind of released. And so in day 3 is when I'm really going into the practice of like going deeper into what else needs to kind of, it's kind of like you're cleaning your room. And once you clean your room, you now go into the boxes of junk that you haven't looked at, right? Whether they're in the attic or in your closet. And so this idea of like third and fourth day is when you actually now go dig deeper into your own consciousness to see what is it you need to process. And so for me, in that third day, I was starting to experience sometimes men, or what I call logically raised beings. A lot of us in this culture are logically based and not emotionally based beings. We use logic to kind of reframe our truth. And so a lot of times it's easy to kind of go, oh, I can see how that was a bad experience. However, if I don't experience the emotion of it, I'm actually suppressing what I was going through. So one of these things that I experienced is reliving my mom's, my mom's trauma. When I was born at 5:45 a.m., but I was still in the hospital till probably about 7 o'clock when my mom was able to take me home. But at the time in the Caribbean, my parents lived in a restaurant. The upstairs was where we lived, but the bottom floor, or the first floor, was where the restaurant was. And so basically, my mom took home work with her every day. And for some reason, many years have passed, and I've seen my mother work so hard, and so I've reframed myself into saying it's okay that mom worked hard because she provided us a life that we had to experience. However, that's reframing from a logical point of view of myself being present today. But if I were to ask, you know, brand new born baby Charlie, what was he experiencing? He was crying. In that moment, I was actually, it was in a dream that I experienced this because I was struggling with understanding, what is my problem with my mother energy? Why do I keep looking for this mother energy in women? And so what happened is I told myself and my guides, please share with me what I need to understand, to connect with, that makes me struggle with my relationship with my mother. I woke up with just a voice that said, remember the day you were born. And I went into it, and just then I had remembered that it's easy to come from a third person to see that baby Charlie is born, but now seeing that his mother has to work, as a third person, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand this. Mom has to work. But when I went to the first person and into the emotion of what newborn Charlie baby was experiencing, I started bawling. I started crying. And it felt so emotional because here I was born. I was like, yay, I'm here in the world. Mom, do you see me? Do you see me? And she wasn't there. And it's ironic because we lived in a restaurant, so a lot of the waitress staff were women. And so what ended up happening, even my dad jokes about it, is like, oh my God, you like all these waitresses, all these women start to pick you up, and then we want to like breastfeed you because you were looking for breast milk. And my mother was working. She was actually taking care of the bills. She was processing a lot of the accounting. That's what she does a lot. And so for me, I was like, holy crap, baby Charlie has been looking for a mother figure for so long. And I was, ironically, I have this infatuation with breasts. Like when people ask, are you a butt or a breast guy? Yeah, I'm a breast guy, right? However, now looking back, I'm like, holy crap, I was basically looking for my mom's breast to breastfeed. And then all these women were giving to me, but again, baby Charlie knew this is not the breast I need. And so I think looking back now, I know it's really weird now being older and really processing this, realizing that inner child made these subconscious triggers. And so now today, like some of my choices is because I have this childhood trauma. And then some other things that actually goes deeper is this idea that finding the blockages and the leaks. So now I'm in the darkness for 3 to 4 days. And the first 2 days, it felt like me talking. It felt like I was talking to myself. I was releasing stuff that really didn't matter at this point. The first 2 days, again, it's monkey chatter. It doesn't matter as much as like when I went into the third day of processing my trauma. And so in that third and fourth, I think it was the fourth day. That fourth day is when like I just didn't have any mental capacity to like talk to myself. So I was just talking to what I call source, God, spirit guides, angels, and they started to talk back. This is because at this point now I'm fully into feeling the pain and the, why did this happen to me? Why am I going through that? Why would mom not love me? Obviously she did love me, but she had to work, right? And so again, that's my reframe, that I choose to say that she was working. It wasn't that she didn't love me, but in the act that she was not there when I was in need of her as a child, I kind of had this distance that happened between me and my mother. And of course, she is a tiger mom, so she pushed me really hard to study, to be better than everybody else. But really, when I was crying, when I was emotionally distraught, she didn't really connect with me. And so this is where like these voices were speaking in these different ways, where they're like, go into what you're looking for, go into what you're missing, because if you do not allow the expression of pain to come out, then the pain is suppressed, right? And so this is the idea of feeling it to heal it. I've heard this so many times. I think it's a very common practice that women go through, but men do not, because we're taught that healing is not a good thing. But I could never hold myself back. I've always been a very sensitive guy. So if I needed to cry, I would actually just go in private and go through the crying process. But as I got older, it was much harder to cry, just because I wasn't experiencing as much trauma as when I was a child, right? And so in that moment of baby Charlie not having his mom, adult Charlie, present Charlie, was trying to reframe it. But baby Charlie goes, shut the fuck up, I'm crying, leave me alone. And in that moment, baby Charlie was so emotional. And at this point, when I say emotional, I'm crying. Obviously, not present Charlie, but baby Charlie's crying. And that childhood version of me was really feeling pain. And in that moment, I had to actually repair myself. Like, what is it that you're looking for? We're looking for mom. We're looking for mom. I need someone to make me feel safe right now. And so this is kind of this deeper experience where, like, today I understand that I need to actually reparent myself. We'll go into the healing part later, but it was kind of like these different versions and voices that I'm channeling now at this point, or speaking with me in my head, are just trying to guide me into feeling the pain that I was suppressing since I was a child. And this is really important because this really helped me with a lot of my childhood trauma. And that was kind of like the major piece, but the other piece I was also struggling with is this idea of social anxiety. And so for the last 2-3 days at this point, I'm going back to the 3-4 years that I experienced a lot of bullying coming to America. I was a French kid, but I was actually Vietnamese ethnically, so I was already speaking 2 languages, and I had to learn a 3rd language to come to America. And I experienced a lot of boys who would physically attack me because first and what sucks is, like, I don't know what they were upset about because I could speak the language, right? And so for me, I then kind of again reframed it in my mind, going, okay, these boys needed to attack me. It has nothing to do with me because they don't know who I am. I just came to America like 2-3 months, and so for them to bully me, I was like, okay, clearly they have an issue. But it was hard to kind of not get upset because I was the one feeling the pain, even though they could be the one acting out their hurt. And so in that moment, on the 4th, 5th day, I think it was probably like the end of the 4th day, I'm doing the same thing that I did with baby Charlie. I went into teenager Charlie, and I wasn't even a teenager at that point. I think I was around 10 years old, 10, 11, 12 years old to 13 years old, right before teenage years. I started to go into this child, and that's when I started to experience the deeper healing, the deeper conversation of like, why is this happening to me? I'm in pain right now. I don't understand why these kids are bullying me. I don't even know their language. I act very differently. I don't even know their culture. So I was really frustrated because I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And and then this is kind of another voice said, Charlie, you are a healer. You didn't become a healer because you went to 5 years of acupuncture school. If you look at your astrology, and this is why I use astrology a lot in this process, even going into it, I knew that I had a lot of 12th house issues, right? Not issues, I'm sorry. Gifts that I had not discovered yet, right? My Venus and my Moon and my North Node are in the 12th house. A lot of people call it the self-sabotaging. But it's really the spiritual house that teaches you how to go deeper into your psychology, because spirituality is not physical. And so I may have experienced physical experiences, but it is beyond the physical, right? It requires you to understand yourself spiritually. So when I went into the deeper process of my social anxiety, you know, my guide said, Charlie, you're born a healer. And you learn to hyper focus and hyper analyze your surroundings because you're always the one who is targeted to get bullied. However, if you understand energetics, like we do as we're adults now, whatever you are, you will attract its polar opposite, right? Masculine, feminine. And this is where the idea of the abuser and the abusee, or the victim, right? The abuser and the victim actually started happening when I was that young. Because before then, I was living pretty carefree. I mean, again, my childhood issues with my mom weren't so bad that I was expressing them. It was more of like very subtle. Because my mom was still around in my life, right? But she was just a very strict, not very emotional mother. So I come to this country and I'm just carefree. I'm just having fun, but I'm like afraid of being in this country because I don't speak the language. If anybody's ever experienced being a child and going to a new country, foreign language, it's pretty scary. So what I was struggling with at the time now is understanding why I was getting attacked. And this is where this voice would tell me, you're born a healer. Who do you think you attracted if you're a healer? Well, guess what? Healers attract people who are hurt. Healers attract people who have been abused. People who have been hurt are attracted to healers. However, because I didn't know how to, like, I would say dim my light, but I was just being a kid. I was authentically being a kid. I grew up in the Caribbeans, being French. And so if you guys don't realize, America has a very, it's hard to explain this, but people love to tell you how they feel in America versus many other countries. No one really sits down and tries to tell you their opinion. No one is that opinionated. Only in this country do people love to tell you what they think about you or what they think about anything. We're a very opinionated culture. And so what I experience is really hurt kids who are looking for me. Now, when you're a 10-year-old kid, you have no tools for dealing with these children. You have no tools for dealing with your own hurt. And you have no tools to deal, or language, to communicate with these children, right? And so what I was actually experiencing was a typical healer finding the ones who are hurt. And so I naturally attracted them. And so when I started to realize that I did not want to attract them, in the year that I was in America, I actually had to really understand, who are these people? I don't understand their language, but I had to learn body language. I had to learn to look in their eyes. I had to learn to look at their aura. And obviously it's not their auric field, but I had to understand their vibe. And so I became hyper aware and sensitive to the people around me. And so by my second, third year, I was super excited that my cousin had moved. And so I was actually watching him. He was a cool kid. And so I watched my cousin do all the things that other boys did. And because of that, I learned how to copy him, right? I learned how to copy what American boys do so I wouldn't be a target. And when that happened, I got bullied less. However, what I was learning to do is to create a space that didn't allow me to look weak, right? And so this is where the beginning of my inauthenticity and wearing masks because I'm trying to avoid getting targeted, right? Getting attacked. And so when that happens, you actually start to reframe your whole reality. You start to look at people as if they are potential threats to who you are. And so this deeper work that I had to go through was that I was finding ways to avoid people. And so this is where I think the beginning of my social anxiety happened. But even the understanding that that happened to me, but I didn't understand why, is the shadow work. That's the shadow dance, right? Is feeling the pain, being angry that I felt that way, but then once I could feel into it, I realized that the conversation or the direction I'm trying to go with my shadowscape is I'm trying to be a doctor. I'm trying to be a healer. And so if I'm a doctor, but I'm avoiding everyone who's been hurt, I'm only finding healed people. And so it's much harder to find the people who are hurt, right? Because technically now I have the tools to help them heal their own trauma so they are not going around hurting others. And that was a very, very deep emotional reframe. Because you can have a perception reframe, but the problem is when you do perception reframe, you are not experiencing the emotion that needs to happen. And so because I was, being a boy in the country, everybody's like, don't cry. Crying is for pussies and for whatever. And like, you're a man if you don't cry. And so eventually I kind of like took that in because that was what was being spewed out in the American culture. And so having that voice come in and say, hey, you've been a healer many times. Just because you now have a degree doesn't mean you're suddenly a healer. Actually, if you pay attention to people's charts, but just personalities, there's so many of us who are healers already, and we don't need to get a degree. Some of us who are healers are like really good friends with people, and we help our friends through a lot of problems. That's a healer, right? But I was meant to be like an actual like healer doctor, and so I'm processing this and realizing, holy crap, the answers has been there all along. I've been reversing my attraction to, or my ability to attract what I want. So today when I do my manifestation, you're really looking for patience. As a doctor, I'm looking for patience so I can get paid, right? However, the deeper conversation is I'm attracting those who are hurt because I am a doctor who studied how to heal these traumatic experiences or responses, reactions. And so, but I've been avoiding those who are hurt. And so this was my deeper healing. And so being able to kind of go into that process, I visualized everything. I went into the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade deeply into my consciousness, deeply into my emotions. I mean, by 8th grade, a lot of it was no longer there, but for those 4 years, those were the years that when people say they wanted to off themselves, that was the time I wanted to leave the planet. But again, the guides that were there during that time, they showed up in my consciousness, and they're like, we were there, Charlie, and we are here today still, and we are still cheering you on and supporting you on because we know that that experience you created, right? That is so not easy to hear because no 10-year-old kid wants to go, you mean I attracted fucked up kids? I mean, yes, they were fucked up, but I don't know them technically because they're not in my experience. I don't even know who these kids are anymore, right? I could never call them out just because I don't remember them. I like forgot their names. But this was a very deep reversal in my consciousness. And I would have never, I've talked about this bullying experience many times to other people, and I really haven't gone into it that much just because, again, I thought I had passed through it, but I hadn't passed through it emotionally. And this is where I think a lot of people don't like to talk about the shadow work. The shadow work forces you to go into the uncomfortable emotions that you've been suppressing. It's a very powerful place to be at. It is the most uncomfortable place to be at. For me to have to relive both baby Charlie's experiences and 10-year-old Charlie, and 10-year-old Charlie wanted to beat up the kid, right? I never did. That wasn't who I was. Even today, like, yes, I may get bouts of anger, but I took martial arts. I took martial arts. I took Aikido, so I know how to protect myself today. But at the time, I didn't. So I can't let present Charlie. I mean, present Charlie was able to soothe teenager Charlie, but teenager Charlie still had to express himself. My mother wasn't around during that time. My father wasn't either. So I lived with my cousins and my aunts and uncle. So not having parents and getting bullied in school in a foreign country you have just came in was very difficult for me. But it was kind of like personally where I got my greatest strength. Because if I was willing to really unalive myself during that time, when I didn't know anything or I didn't know any better, today when I do know a little bit more, and I mean, I still experience challenges, you know, as at this age now, if anything, like we experience, you know, do we have enough to pay the bills, right? Because I'm an adult now, so I got to pay my own bills, right? Versus a kid, that's not what you experience. And so for me, it was very difficult to experience going back into that childhood phase, but it was so important. And so I've kind of mentioned this a few times, but a lot of these voices that came through for me were my spirit guides. I had a lot of different perspectives. They were sharing their different wisdom. I don't know if I've shared this with many people, but a lot of my spirit guides I talk to, one of them is Kuan Yin. My greatest spirit guide that I connect with is Kuan Yin. A lot of my family have prayed to Kuan Yin for many, many lifetimes, and still today. My dad talks about how he prays to her when my older sister was struggling with, you know, almost dying from something. And so our family are very much connected to Kuan Yin. But for me personally, I've always had a really deep connection with Kuan Yin. My deep connection with what I call Siddhartha, Buddha, is he always gives me that smirk that like, I know that I know that you know everything you need to know, right? And he doesn't always give me the greatest wisdom. He only just reflects back into me that I am the Tao, I am the Buddha, and Buddha has all the answers. Just our perception of our ego that we believe that we are not the source creator makes us believe that we're not in control of our reality. That's why we get upset, angry at what happens to us. However, a lot of these guides, and actually this is the first time I've had people tell me that I had Jesus and Mary Magdalene in my field, but it wasn't until this time Jesus and Mary really showed up. And that's where I haven't shared this part, but the connection with women. I think for me, because of my mother and all of my sisters, so I have 3 sisters, y'all, no brothers. So that means I was raised by women. My dad was absent here and there, but even when he is around, he will often take what any of my sisters says over his voice. So already I live in a world where the man's voice is always below a woman's voice. And so I will get into a relationship where, you know, now today, like everyone says, oh yeah, like don't give in to women, right? I always did. I always had to, just because I didn't experience a masculine voice that was able to kind of speak to women and women would actually respect it, right? And I'm not saying this is like all about telling women what to do. This is about 2 people, man and a woman, speaking to each other. And today my parents are divorced. Well, technically separated. So I already live in a separated mother and father house, right? My older sister also had a divorce, right? So in my family, relationship with men is traumatic, and I am the only man in the family, so I have taken on a lot of these experiences of men are good enough for women. Which makes me the worst guy, right? Because at this point, both my mother and my 3 sisters would tell me all the time how much they hate this about men. Well, not realizing they're literally just projecting it onto me and because I am the only son, the only brother, I'm picking it up. So in this shadow work dance that I'm having, Mother Mary and Jesus show up. Y'all, I didn't grow up that Christian, so this is not a Christian thing. It's not a Catholic thing. I believe this is about ascended masters who have shared their knowledge with us. I really believe that Jesus and Mary have a whole different set of books. They're called the Book of Love, called A Course of Miracles. I think Jesus and Mary were divine pairs, and they were really what brought the change of marriage between a man and a woman. Because until then, we were dealing with the whole men were buying women for wives, right? Like women were being given off into other families to be dowry so that families would join. So like marriage was terrible in the olden days. It's just a much more recent experience where men and women are getting to choose themselves out of love. And so to me, the Jesus and Mary represents kind of this divine union where both of them were powerful spiritual leaders. And they were representing the book of love. Jesus was born during the age of Pisces. This is why we see the fish of Jesus. And because they were both around during the age of Pisces, where it was all about spiritual and unconditional love. And so in my need to want to heal my own issues with women, I needed to experience what it meant to have divine union. So I asked, is there anyone in my spirit guides that could explain to me divine union? Because I'm stuck trying to imagine a world outside of divine union because all I see is just the relationship that didn't work out for me. So Jesus and Mary showed up, and they didn't speak a lot. They were all emotions. And the emotion that fell between the man and the woman spiritually, it's hard to describe. But if I were to say, and this is why I get really upset with today's churches or today's temples, today's religion, where are the divine couples? Buddha left his wife, y'all. Every religion, Jesus supposedly married a whore. Not true, right? But only Jesus is in the Christian Catholic faith. What's up with the Muslim crew, yo? Like, where are the women? I think the closest thing we have is the Hindus, where they talk about Shakti, and I forget the guy version of that. But, they talk about tantric as spiritual. In every other religion, sex is a bad thing. Makes no sense to me, y'all. Makes no sense to me. And that's why I think we struggle today about the sacral chakra, the sex energy chakra, because we're not allowed to experience it in a more divine spiritual way. And so when Jesus and Mary showed up, they're like, this is how it feels to be in divine union. But you, Charlie, as the representation of the masculine, you need to love yourself so much so that the opposite energy will loving herself so much that she'll be able to recognize that reflection. And that was very deep for me because, again, if you look at these inner circles, I have done a lot of inner self work. I've done a lot of ego release. And you can never release your ego. You'd have to die to release your ego. So anyone who tells you kill your ego, sure, but like it's gonna come back. That's the whole idea of the Scorpio energy. The ego comes back. It doesn't die. If it dies fully, you don't come back. The ego is the container of our physical self in this reality. Anyways, moving on. And then I've dealt with some family trauma. For the last 5 years, I've been living at home and living with my dad, seeing my sisters every weekend, which before I would see them once, twice a year. So I did a lot of healing in that space. And guess what? When you finally go through family healing, your ancestors show up. So until coming to Houston, I was channeling a lot more what I call extra dimensional beings. I talk sometimes to the Arcturians, I talk to the Pleiadians, the Andromedans come in once and twice, but mostly Arcturians and Pleiadians. And this might sound super crazy, but y'all, like, there's a reason why we talk about the Pleiades constellation in space, okay, in astrology, and there's a reason we talk about the Boots constellation of Arcturus. And so it is not made up. They're actually constellations or planetary systems in our universe, galaxy. But anyways, and so in the last couple of months, what's really been beautiful is the ancestral healing is happening. I know many of us have shared this, but I myself have to share this because in my studies to go into Chinese medicine, I had an ancestor who followed me. He's like, hey, you need to go into acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And I was like, what? And when I did, this is where the ancestral unlocking happened. I feel like right now I'm in this third circle where my genetics, my culture are re-waking up. In my getting bullied, I was trying to avoid being Asian because I thought being Asian was shameful. I was in America, you got to be American, right? America loves to tell you you have to look American because if you don't look American, you're going to get bullied. And so I felt a little bit of shame in wanting to dress up as my culture. Even to talk about acupuncture or cupping. All of us were doing cupping before I got the degree in cupping. Like, I had seen cupping. My mom used to do cupping all the time to my dad. She doesn't have a degree for that. She just did it. This is what our culture did. And so when I was talking to my guides, the Arcturians and Pleiadians like smiled and said, there are other guides you need to talk to right now. And they left. I haven't seen the Arcturian and Pleiadians in a while, but the last thing they said is, Charlie, we've seeded humanity with our culture. The Arcturians, the Pleiadians, other star galaxies, they've seeded us, y'all. So when I tell you this is not a crazy idea, but all of the races here have been seeded from galactic sources. And so we represent today's descendants of the galactics that embedded their genetics and culture into our human civilizations. It was during Atlantis and Lemuria, but even post, we had a lot of extra dimensional beings that was involved in our cultures. That will be another episode. This is not for today. But what I wanted to say is I've had many guides showed up, many guides leave, and many guides now part of my everyday experience because when I'm studying for the boards today in Chinese medicine, I call my Eastern doctors who have lived many lives with me to be my presence when I'm studying, to be my presence when I'm learning or remembering my Chinese medicine heritage, right? And when I say Chinese, I know ironically I'm saying that in the general idea of Asians, okay? I'm not going to say Vietnamese Chinese, Vietnamese Tibetan, Vietnamese Mongolian. I have a lot of these mixed Asians. But those kind of were the voices that I experienced in my shadowscape. And finally, I like to share this idea. So this is Kuan Yin here. I have a beautiful deck with her. And the card that I pulled after my 6-day retreat was the daughter of the Phoenix. And so this is just in honor of her, but honor in this idea of the Phoenix rising, because everyone who goes into shadow work gets a Phoenix rising. This is why Scorpio is such a prevalent energy when it comes to shadowscaping, right? This is why in the kivas, in the Native American kivas are actually these underground huts, sections where people go through journeys and they go down in where the Scorpios are. They're going down there to go where the Scorpios are. I don't know the full scope of it. I've only got bits and pieces of it, but this idea is actually if you are in fear, the Scorpios will come closer. When you are generating unconditional love, the Scorpios don't come close to you, right? And they don't sting you. It's really amazing concept because it actually teaches you how to actually love yourself and generate unconditional love to really heal this part of yourself. Anyways, so this reversal that I was sharing and we were talking about earlier was of this idea that I had to learn to reframe myself, but to also give myself unconditional love in the moment that I was feeling pain, and to see that I was the hero of my own journey, right? Baby Charlie chose the mom that would work so that I wasn't able to experience a mother's love in the physical. But today I realize, I mean, Kuan Yin, Mother Gaia, they are my mothers. They are constantly talking to me. They're constantly sharing me love. When I'm struggling emotionally, they give me a hug. I get a hug from them everywhere I go. I could be anywhere in the world and it would hold me tightly. When I went to Egypt, I had this beautiful experience with Isis, which is the great mother again, in a different form. And so it, it's a very beautiful power to be able to experience um, this canon event to teach me that I have this spiritual mother with me all the time, right? And that was very powerful because it's again this whole moon in the 12th house. And just, I mean, the 12th house represents spirituality, so it makes sense that like the mother that I connect with is basically a spiritual mother, right? Yes, I can touch Mother Earth, but her energy, wherever I go, she's there with me. The other piece too is this idea of like pushing through the pain. The Phoenix Rising experience is you have to die or release the old shell of yourself so that you can actually rise up as a new version of yourself. So this idea of pushing through the pain, you have these dark emotions that you have to go into, and that's the ego death. I think when you go into these emotions of feeling pain and suffering, why me, why me, why me, but you realize you wrote this whole story, you're your own journey, and all these emotions are just guides to help you heal what is triggering within. And so to be able to really go into this dark emotion and then being so focused that you know that it's only going to get better, because I already experienced the unaliving during that 10, 11 years old age. So right now, like I would never want to unalive myself because I know that whatever I go through cannot be as bad as what I experienced when I was 10, 11. And so today, I really love pushing through pain because I've been in so many after the part of pain, right? I've trained for triathlons, I've trained for really hard physical stuff, even yoga, you do really hard poses, you're like shaking, but after that you feel great. So practicing how to push through these dark pain or challenges really teaches you how to become the Phoenix. And finally, what's important at Phoenix is when you face fear and terror, you might feel fear and terror, but in your release of fear and terror, you actually finally experience unconditional love for yourself. And that's actually what's really powerful. Is a lot of people don't understand that why we experience trauma in this reality is because I think we've taken love for granted. Um, Spirits has told me many times that like many lifetimes souls didn't grow up fast enough or took forever to grow up. And so when you take away love, in a way for them to learn what love is, you have to take it away. It's kind of like the whole spoiled children concept. When you coddle kids too much, you like help them too often, then they're constantly looking for you for help, right? And this is why like today we experience that why is God not helping us, right? God is giving you everything we need to not depend on the source, but to know that we are source itself. And so unconditional love really happens when you're able to face your fear and terror and then kind of go, wait, this whole fear and terror is just an illusion of lack of love. But if I am divine creator, I already have this unconditional love for myself, right? And so it's when you actually are able to finally let go of the fear and terror, do you actually finally experience love, unconditional love for yourself? Because even when you're afraid and you don't want to face, you find love there. So it was a very powerful, what I call ego, releasing my ego shell to come into a new version of myself. And finally, it's really important to have the gratitude after coming out. And so on my 6th day, after a few more of these deep conversation with all my guides, and then having different guides show up. And again, I'm giving you guys the cliff notes. I would be here way too long, but I'm trying to give you my top 3 experiences that I struggled with to share with you, because I wanted you to understand what it takes to go through shadow work. And yes, they're easy for me to talk to today, but like before the dark retreat, I wouldn't have talked to anybody about this. I talked to people about the bullying. I didn't talk to a lot of people about or I didn't realize I had issues in relationships until, my most recent relationship, she broke up with me. And I was sitting there going, I, I've gone through all these relationships and not once did I break up with them. They all broke up with me. So clearly I'm the problem, right? And so I had to go deep down and face that I was the problem in the relationship. That's not easy for a lot of people to kind of step into, but that was my fear, and I was not telling anyone this. So today, because I'm able to say this, it just shows that I'm no longer emotionally charged with it. And so the gratitude that I come out of the 6 days was really to experience all the pain that I experienced was part of my what people are calling canon events, right? We talk about this in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where they're talking about multiple realities. People talk about milestones, but really it shows up in your astrology. Your transits in astrology prep your canon events. So when you go through a transit, sometimes they're canon events. This is why it's very important that we have to, in unconditional love and compassion, we don't help people too much when they're going through their canon events. Even when we go through plant medicine and people are struggling, sometimes you have to like hold space for them to let them get out of it. Every time we come and save someone, this is why we have to watch out for the savior complex. You lose power in trusting yourself. And so the gratitude to me was that this canon event of my mother, the social anxiety from bullying, my relationship with women, were all created by me before I was born. And everything that I do, I am the creator who makes everything happen to me. The world doesn't happen to me. If you believe that, you are a victim and you cannot access the abilities of the creator, right? So that's very important to understand that. And so some other things that's really important to understand is that there are also, these are my like key takeaways, the gratitude that I have for this experience is you are exactly where you need to be, right? And that's very important to understand, because too many times the victim always go, why can this go better for me? Why did this can't, right? And you always kind of blame somebody, some other experience, but you don't realize that actually the moment where you're at and that anger that you're at informs you that you need change. And so you are exactly where you need to be to experience that. Everything we experience in our past was exactly for us, created by us, to experience by us. And again, that's people may understand it in the mind, but people have to understand in their hearts, right? Because it's in your heart that you're able to then face your shadows. Because in your mind, this is where like all the things you make up. Remember I told you about the mindscape, that after 2 days you're able to release all of it. Every time you're around people, you're picking people's shit up. And so that's coming into your consciousness, right? So because I wasn't around anyone, I was able to dump what was in my mind. The second piece that's really important is judging an event keeps you from enjoying the event. It's a very, very important thing. I sometimes struggle with, I know many of us struggle with. I have a really anecdote in the next slide that I really want to share about this, but this idea that anything that happens to us, we sometimes will judge it, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And we don't actually appreciate what happens, right? It's in this moment where recently I had just broken up with someone, and so I'm like crying about it, right? However, like in the moment that I'm having this 5th day possibly, I'm also upset again, right, in healing my relationship issue. And as much as I realize what I've done to myself, I was both crying and laughing at the same time. I'm crying because it's painful, but I'm laughing because I created the whole experience to teach myself something so I can grow. And it dawned on me that I created that person, and she came into my life exactly how I needed it to happen, because she now has taught me not being with me what I needed to heal within myself. And the second piece, it's kind of the same thing, but this idea that I had to lighten up a little bit too, right? To be able to laugh and cry at different experiences. I think too often, I experience this a lot with cannabis. Sometimes cannabis kind of gives you a false sense of it's okay, but you might be really upset still. And so I took a lot of experiences very seriously. However, now when shit happens, and especially in my sober stage, I can kind of laugh about it while I'm like in pain, right? Or like you stub your toe, you're both laughing and crying. It's painful, but I'm laughing because I'm like, yep, I did it. I'm not gonna blame the bed that's been sitting there for like forever, right? It's only me absent-minded and not being aware where my foot is that I hit myself. So it really kind of shows you how to enjoy the moments that happen and not to judge it. Oh, I stubbed my toe, bad experience. And the last piece that I want to be very grateful for, and I hope many of you experience this because it makes life a little bit easier to experience, and we are going to come to a time where we're going to be able to hear these voices much more clearer, is we are never alone. Never. I think we just lack the ability to interdimensionally communicate with each other. Take it back. We can communicate with them. They communicate with us. We are not listening to them. And the reason why I say that is because the only reason, and they even told me this going into it, I asked them, what do I need to heal some of this? They go, Charlie, go into a darkness retreat. And I was like, I wouldn't make that up. I don't want to do that. That sounds not fun at all. And so they were telling me, you're not listening. You're not listening. You keep distracting yourself. So I was like, fine. I'm going to see what this is all about because you guys keep telling me that I need to go and listen to y'all. After that third day is when I started to listen because again, I had nothing to distract me from, so I was only listening at this point. And it made me realize that we have so many guides with us. We just don't know how to. I interpret them through, I see driver's license numbers, I see numbers a lot. But again, just because I'm running around and I'm happy and I'm not thinking about anything, I see a number, that's not telling me that they're there. So we have to be careful that not every single 444, 555 is our guides. It's when we're having a conversation with them or when they're supporting us, but we're actively having a conversation within ourselves that those messages come in. Or when you're with friends and you're having this deep conversation and boom, these numbers show up. That's when you pay attention, right? So again, there's so many people who are using these these evidence of spirit talking to us, and they're kind of making fun that oh, you're like that one guy where you wait in line at the 444 line and you think that the angels are there with you because you're in line because of the 444. Because again, there's a lot of hijacking. People can totally hijack, oh, coming to my temple, I am a 444 church, right? And they could easily kind of trick us into that. So it's again that discernment of when that number shows up, you know that you're having a deeper conversation with souls. Okay, so a beautiful story that I want to share with you guys because this is a deep story that I always remember when I'm judging moments, and I try very hard not to judge them. Checking on time here. Ooh. So, a farmer and his son had a beloved stallion who helped the family earn a living. One day, the horse ran away, and their neighbors exclaimed, "Your horse ran away! What terrible luck!" The farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." A few days later, the horse returned home, leading a few wild mares back to the farm as well. The neighbors shouted, "Your horse has returned and brought several horses home with you." What great luck!" The farmer replied. "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." Later that week, the farmer's son was trying to break one of these mares, and She threw him to the ground, breaking his leg. The villagers cried, "Your son broke his leg. What terrible luck!" The farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." A few weeks later, soldiers from the National Army marched through town, recruiting all the able-bodied boys for the army. They did not take the farmer's son, still recovering from his injury. Friends shouted, "Your boy's spared! What tremendous luck!" To which the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." And so this is a very deep story, Asian American, not Asian American, I'm sorry. I think this is a Chinese story of Chinese farmers. And this is probably a very common occurrence back in the days when wars were happening all over the world. And this deep parable, I think it's a parable, really shows us how we shouldn't always judge what happens to us as a good or bad, because we never know what is going to happen to us or what the event was meant to teach us or to help us with or to make things difficult for us to grow into, right? And so it's important to not judge experiences, because this is, again, here I am judging my experience of my mother, judging the experience of me, growing up in this country now. I mean, today, I love that I'm an Asian American, right? My family left Asia before the Communist Party took over our culture. So we carry unadulterated culture. However, some of that has been overwritten by what I call Stockholm Syndrome, the American culture that we experience today, right? And that is where we are not overriding, I think, but what happened is we made space for it. And so now today, a lot of us Asian Americans have space for both of these cultures, and we're kind of merging the two, allowing me to speak up as an Asian American. I mean, I'm as Asian, I don't think I would be able to feel comfortable enough to speak on YouTube about my shit, right? Asians don't air out their laundry, right? That's one of the culture of Asian cultures, of Asian traditions. So I would never have been able to pull this off, because as an Asian, I'm not allowed to do this, right? Yet, as Americans, you guys love to talk about your opinions. So why couldn't I have shared my opinion as an Asian American? Because we don't hear enough from Asians. We hear from every other fucking minority, y'all. But unfortunately, us Asians are still the very quiet minority. And so this is kind of a deeper experience for me, for myself, but for my own cultures and my own people, the people who look like me, who grew up with this culture, and we're here in a country that is starting to fuse multiple cultures. So I want to do my part and be able to express my culture. And so this is a great story of understanding how to not judge experiences. I'm getting to the end here. So finally, what I like to share is the healings and upgrades I got really was to be able to turn around these skills. So for me, I'm a healer. I'm naturally able to be hyper aware of what's happening in a setting, in an environment. And so because of that, I am someone that can go, hey, you guys, you need to calm down. Let's talk about what's going on, and be a mediator in conversations with groups. Where before I'd be like, oh shit, something's gonna, is about to go down. I'm out. Peace. Right? And so it was really easy for me to run away from problems. But as I realized, and I'm tuning into my masculinity, I realized men need to stand up to be in confrontation, to diffuse it. It's not the female's role to do it, right? The female role is to do the healing after we've diffused it, but the male is supposed to take the hits, hold it down, and make sure that no one's dying. However, we need to stop the conflict, because we're fighting each other, brothers and sisters. We're all brothers and sisters on this planet. So the fact that we're not able to do that means that we've been tricked into hating the best parts of ourselves. And to realize I am a healer, and I have to really own up to that, because I've been avoiding healing, because I've been avoiding hurt people. I hope I don't run into. I probably should not manifest this, but this is where it's important to to reframe my gifts in a way that is supporting myself. And so even when I'm like saying in mantras of I'm attracting the best patient for myself, but if I'm afraid to see people, I'm really canceling out that mantra. So to be able to say that I'm ready and I have the tools to be reflecting the healing of other people in them, I need to stop being afraid of people, right? Because I know all of us are brothers and sisters, but a lot of you brothers and sisters didn't like me when I was young, right? And so I had to kind of release that shell. So now I am really Phoenix rising, coming back to myself as a healer, but recognizing that the gift of hyper awareness is actually a gift of recognizing what you're not seeing because I'm seeing it in you because I've been avoiding people like you. So now I get to kind of go into it and go, I see you're in pain. How can I reflect what you need to heal with, right? So this has been very important for me. So from social anxiety to leading from the heart, super powerful. The biggest piece that I think many of us need to hear. And the whole social anxiety thing, I think that's actually more of us than we realize. I think there's a lot more of us who have been bullied by anything, right? It's not just the Asian Americans. I'm sure many minorities were bullied, but I'm sure a lot of boys who were sensitive were bullied by other boys who were not, right? But the biggest piece here that's obviously yellow here is to reparent yourself and to trust in yourself. This is why the self-healing journey is such an important conversation for me in my life. I didn't grow up with my parents all the way through emotionally. They paid for like my life, but like when I came to this country, my parents, both of them were not here physically. I don't talk to my parents, and about my problems because they both speak in Vietnamese and I speak a lot more English. Obviously, because I was bullied for speaking not English, so I learned to like be an expert in this language so I could kind of fit in. But I struggle with being able to speak to my parents in Vietnamese because there's a lot of things that like I didn't learn how to say emotion. I think Vietnamese people don't have words for emotion. I know they do. I'm being facetious here, but clearly I didn't learn those. So that's something that I'll have to learn. But again, it's to say that like if my mom and dad were to die, if my mom and dad were to die here, would I be screwed, right? And so this is the idea. Even if my mom and dad are still alive, that I don't have to expect them to parent me the way I need to be parented because I am not them. And plus, I'm in a whole other culture. They didn't grow up being American or French. I was French and American at one point, right? And so they didn't have to grow up that way, right? They grew up in a war torn. They left their country out of war, so they cannot express that to me because I haven't experienced war that I had to leave my country of origin. I did leave my country of origin, but not for war. And finally, accessing deeper powers of expression. Again, this whole journey of me being online. Yes, I was online the last couple years, but I really didn't want to. I was doing it because, again, these voices were telling me that it was my place to, but in my heart, I didn't feel comfortable. And so going through this dark retreat, I was able to really go into what this um, trauma or how this trauma was holding me back. And I thought I was like, 40 years old. I totally got away with like not processing these emotions. But no, y'all, like all the stuff I experienced when I was a kid, coming to this country, like I hadn't processed in a long time because I thought like, hey, I'm American. I totally looked the part, right? Here I am not looking the part anymore. But again, it was like, how did I have to process that? And today now I'm able to speak to you all. I'm not afraid of people talking shit. Why? Because I dealt with that all my life. Even this idea that people were afraid to not wear masks around people who were wearing masks, right? Or vice versa. And they were afraid, Charlie, like, you're not afraid people, like, will think weird shit about you? I'm like, I was bullied when I was 10. This is just another version of bullying. So I'm over it because clearly this planet loves to state their opinion, but it's just an opinion. Everybody's hurt like me, but they're just stating the projection of that opinion, right? And so when we go through healing, and so today, I don't need to tell people what they're going through is good or bad because I've healed that part of myself. So because I've healed that part of myself, I understand what they're going through, and there's no need to judge them. Just like the man with the sun and the horse, right? Whatever people are going through, maybe not, maybe yes, we'll see. And so because of that, I've learned to actually go deeper, and that's actually why people really love to come to me when I'm being a healer, because a lot of times I don't tell them, oh, it's because the 10 years that you've done this, you've had this. No, it's like, dude, I'm here for you. It doesn't matter that you've gone through this for 10 years. I'm not going to judge you for 10 years. That was your story. For me, I'm 40 years old and still, failing a relationship. But hey, it's part of my story. I don't want someone to pity me for that. If anything, like I take pride in that. It took me this long. But this is the idea of like being able to express yourself authentically, not to feel judged of what I'm feeling, and to know that many of you guys feel this way. So I hope that I could give you some hope, some some hope and inspiration to go into your own shadow work. If you need to have a guide to walk you through shadow work, I'm here for that. If you need to talk to your parents to go through that shadow work, please. But really, we should all be doing shadow work. And guess what? It is important to know when to do shadow work. And so our next phase is, y'all, it is so important to do shadow work during very important transits. And I'm going to say this because it was such a big point for me to go through this transit because everything lined up. I didn't have anything to do for a whole week. It was actually the July 4th weekend, so no one needed me. It was July 4th. Everyone was out and about partying, right? Where I was like, I'm not partying. I'm going into like the shadow party, right? And so during that time, Saturn and Neptune are currently retrograding. It's been retrograding for almost 6 months now. I'm sorry, for 3 months. For 5 more months it's going to go. And so in Pisces, it's actually helping us grow into our spiritual being. It's helping us, as it's retrograding, Saturn is all about karma, and Neptune is all about breaking boundaries and going beyond our dreams. However, when they're both retrograding, they're telling us review, reflect, and redo anything in our life. So when this showed up, and then I'm going through July 4th, I'm like, holy crap. It's a really good time for me to go through my own personal journey of healing. And so really Saturn is called the planet of karma, y'all. So the fact that it is retrograding, it's kind of like you're graduating from either college or high school, and they're like, which homeworks have you turned in? You have an opportunity to turn them all in right now and to get new grades and to get a whole new GPA when you graduate. Why wouldn't you go back and do that homework? So I did. However, there was also a couple more things. The double Capricorn moons were really awesome because the moon is about emotion. So, and when it's a full moon, that emotion is lit. This is why the idea that when a full moon happens, a lot of people's emotions start to rise to the surface, and that's kind of where we become lunatics. Okay? Where this is why during the full moon there's a lot of psychosis that happens, a lot of crazy people that go out into the streets. And this is why the cops and psychologists say that this is a really busy time when there's a full moon. So the full moon in Capricorn is like having a full moon with Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. So by having a full moon in the beginning of July and a full moon at the end of July, take that back, hold on. A full moon in June and a full moon in July, I was sandwiched by double whammy of emotional karma. So I was like, okay, in between those Capricorn energy, I'm going to go deeper into my shadow work because this is a time where my emotion needs to actually process karmically what's happened to me. And what a beautiful experience that in between the Capricorn, you actually have a new moon in Cancer. So this is a time where basically the moon, if you guys don't know, it's actually connected to your mother. So it worked out that like I could totally reparent myself and heal my mother energy through the new moon in Cancer. So it's beautiful to go into the dark side because then it's also a good time to go through initiation, right? And so I went through my own initiation of the Phoenix Rising or healing through my mother's wounds. And so this final card here, actually, if you guys don't know, this is a tarot card of the Devil card. And this tarot card is basically Capricorn and Saturn. So it's again, it's very beautiful because I didn't pull this card, but this is a card that actually most people don't realize that it's not a scary card. This card actually tells you to go in shadow work because if you look at the card, yes, the devil's sitting there like talking shit probably, but if you guys look at both the man and the woman, they are chained up, right? However, the chain around the neck looks big enough for them to just take it off their neck. And that's this deeper work that we have to do that we don't realize that a lot of our own chains, a lot of the things that hold us down are actually made up. They're not actually that tight around our neck that it's impossible to remove. And now this is really deep because this is the idea that the devil is not actually holding you into your prison. You are holding yourself in a prison. This is Stockholm Syndrome, 100%, right? And so when you go through shadow work, you release Stockholm's programming. So, and I use Stockholm Syndrome a lot because, again, I study psychology. And like when I read Stockholm Syndrome, realized we are all in a giant Stockholm Syndrome. We have been led to believe all these things are wrong where technically they're all good for us, right? Even the idea of the devil, yes, be scared of the devil, but if you face the devil, you'll walk out being source itself, right? Being Jesus who fought the devil, right? We are that Jesus character. I'm sure people think that sounds like blasphemy, but I have my own connection with Jesus, so I don't need anyone to tell me their version of connecting with Jesus. But look at the devil card, right? If you guys see here, she could literally just take this off her neck. I've seen another one where they're both in cages, but the door of the cage is open. Just to show that we are our own saviors. The devil is only trying to trick us into believing that we cannot get out of the situation. But technically, if you actually face your own devil, you would actually free yourself. Another version of this is you probably heard the elephants that are attached by a rope around their neck, and that any adult elephant would know how to actually break out of the rope. But when a child, baby elephant is born, and you put that rope around them, they can't get out of it. So because they've had this rope around them as children, they believe that rope is stronger than them. And that's kind of the power of shadow work. The shadow work is keeping you from releasing or becoming a new person. So when you go into this deep shadow work, you are releasing an old version of yourself to realize that you have the keys all along. And so, in conclusion, it's been going on for about almost an hour and a half. It's been a very long, but it was a very deep reflection of shadow work and my own shadow practice. Is it's important for us to go through this. So I'd like for you all to share with me, what is your shadow work practice? Would you like to share anything that you've experienced in your shadow work? It's important that we all share this because everybody does it differently, but we should be inspiring ourselves to not be afraid of our own shadows, right? Because, that's the joke too, right? Like, when people say, like, they're scared of their own shadow, now you shouldn't be scared of your own shadow. So I want to say thank you for listening. If you've gotten this far into the video, thank you so much for listening. I hope you've picked up some inspiration, some tips, some confidence in your own shadowscape journey. I call it my shadow dancing, just because I'm not battling my shadows. My shadows are there for me. I'm not fighting my shadows because, like I said today, my shadows are part of me now, right? So please subscribe to my channel, put a thumbs up, and share your stories with me. I love to hear more stories. And if you're interested to learn more about shadowscaping, please send me a message, connect with me, and we can have a deeper conversation about this. So thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciated um, being able to express myself to all of you or whoever's listening, even to that one person that listens. Thank you. Thank you. You are my fan, and I am your fan. So you all, you have a great day, great evening, and until next time on our journey together here on the Self Healing Podcast, Self Healing Journey.